Now ready for our discussion period, which would involve Chubaka and Gassner and Bayani, as well as Stückelberger. So the first thing is to ask you whether any of you would like to comment on each other's presentations. Any questions or comments that you'd like to address to your fellow presenters?
If I may ask one yes. To Quilala Bayani. Thank you for your impressive presentation. And I think what I see as you live in a country where you have thousands of years of such catastrophes, you have a kind, that's my perception, of resilience. I'm not glorifying the Philippines, but you had to learn a kind of resilience to deal with that. And my question is, could we learn from you for this way how you deal with this? And I think it's a mental issue also, because I see that young people, for example, who grew up in wealth and security, our kids and our younger generation, they are not used to catastrophes. So they become mentally sick because they are so confused of what's happening right now. And I think we could probably learn. Can you give us, let's say, a young person in Europe who gets crazy, who is locked down as a student, what resilient history?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Christoph. 2 points. One is that I think our faith has a lot to do with it. I mean, the Philippines is more than 80% Catholic here, and that's really deeply ingrained in since the 1500s when we were discovered. And the Filipinos, you know, they have this tendency. Well, we have this tendency to turn to our faith. Any problems arises, and aside from that, we focus on the family. So that's one thing that we're very proud of, especially the young generation. They look up to their family, and we're not a rich country. So the direction of most young individuals are always on how to take care and provide for their families. And so this is a very, very motivating factor. And then finally, I also want to say that maybe it's because of how it's ingrained in us. A little bit of history about the Philippines. When Miguel Lopez de Legazpi during the 1550s came to the Philippines, the capital wasn't in Manila. It's located somewhere in Bohol and somewhere, but they had to move it in Manila because he found out the Filipinos were practicing subsistence farming, wherein they don't really prepare for the future. You know, they don't stockpile. They don't. So Miguel Lopez de Legazpi had to move the capital to Manila because at least it's connected to the large rice fields in the central Luzon area. So what does that say about the Filipino mentality? Is that they're very relaxed in terms of their culture. They know everything is going to be okay. And we have a saying, it's called bathala na or bahala na. You'll be hearing that term. It roughly translated, God will take care of us. And that's I think that forms a huge impact.
Amen. Let's see. Would anybody else like to have a comment here on any of the 4 presentations?
Yeah, can I just have one?
Okay. Okay, great.
I'm sorry, Chubaka. Can I just? This is just this is not even a question. It's just more of a. Dennis, how did you plan out the speakers for this session? Did you plan them out or?
No, I didn't.
Because it's
part of our team did, and I think that. I mean, this may sound completely arbitrary, possibly even an example of Bahala Na, although the decisions were made in Macau.
Right.
It was, a lot of it was based on time zones.
Okay.
Bringing together all these people from all over, well, at least half of the world or so, and trying to find them in a time zone that would be least inconvenient for the various speakers.
Right. The reason why I asked, because the ordering is, for me, the profound idea of the speakers involved. It's very interesting, and it's perfect that Christoph ended it, because he talks about balance. But ever since the beginning of the speakers, like Emmanuel, he was already talking about the balance of the bad things that's in the air, of all the pollutants, and they're trying to strive for a balance. And then with our next speaker, Father Franz, with regards to responsible investments, I am reminded by what Christoph said about global isms being general ideology. So now Franz, through his paper, is also discussing about working investment per se, working its way towards that standard. For example, if you're into coal, 30%, we won't invest in you. So there's a standardization that's coming. There's a standardization that's happening wherein the balance is trying to find its center, and then one way or the other, it will try to find its center eventually. And in the case of my paper, it's just also very aligned with Christoph and the rest of my esteemed colleagues here, the speakers. It's all about the balance between risk and risk and rewards in terms of insurance and covering for trying to get insurance for the calamities that are bound to happen. So yeah, so I think it's I don't know how, maybe divine intervention, but it's perfect. I appreciate the way everything was. I appreciate everything the way it was organized. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, Franz, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, may I ask Professor Stückelberger?
Please.
I think I read your book about fair trade many years ago, or you published a book on fair trade, Welthandel.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to ask, what do you think about the role of the consumer when we compare it with companies or government or other NGOs, religions? What role is the consumer for this topic towards the new paradigm of economics?
Yeah, thank you. This is a concern since my first book in '79 on sustainability. I think that the consumer, is it a fair trade consumer? Is it just what they buy? Is an important actor in terms of indicator where to go, because the consumer can act beyond legislation. He can be a pathfinder and a kind of pioneer with his action. And then the trends, the major trends follow this kind of consumers quite often. If you look at history of consumption, nevertheless, the consumer is overloaded if everything is put on the shoulder of the consumer. Some liberal concepts say, yeah, the consumer has to decide, we just offer the options. That's wrong. We need the rules and regulations and legislations and standards to guide the consumer, especially when it comes to not a small, tiny group of pioneers of consumers, but to mass consumption. So that's another way of balance. The state has to set standards, has to forbid. Today we say this and this is no more possible. And what is happening in the EU is going in the right direction. We have to make some sustainable production the standard. And we can no more allow to say, yeah, CO2 emission is okay, and we compensate with CO2 credits. That's not enough. So there is a sensitive balance between consumer and regulator, but I put more emphasis on the regulator's responsibility.
Thank you for this clarification.
And I think your example of the bank, and I know these German banks, Christian banks, quite well, is a very good example. You are then in between the consumer. You offer products to consumers, but at the same time, you are also forerunners for regulation. You can do regulation as a bank before the state is coming, and you show between the consumer and the state regulator where to go.
Can I come?
One thing regarding Christoph, your presentation, I must say that your way of thinking about ethics and about balance, the first part of your presentation, before you got to applications, this was a marvelously clear statement, and something I think that unlike what many of us struggle with in teaching ethics, it is teachable in a relatively short period of time, that you could communicate this. And so, you know, that in itself is a tremendous contribution. As to your three applications, starting with the question of a post-dollar global financial architecture, et cetera, it seems to me we could devote a conference to each one of those. Those are very complex issues and very, very challenging, but I'm so glad that you would go further and try to give us some applications of how GloBalance might actually help to solve some problems. So thank you very much for that. Is Chubaka in the house?
Yes, I'm there, yes.
Dennis, may I just add one sentence?
Oh yeah, right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We plan to have this GloBalance concept as an online teaching course. So if you have any inputs on that, because we want to make it also feasible interculturally for the different continents. Yeah. So I hope that by the end of next year, we will have an online course on that you can use for your offline or online teaching.
Be good. That would be.
I just sent my email on the chat. Sorry.
Okay, there's your email address. And I'm hoping we'll have a figure. I would like to do that with everybody who has made a presentation, is that we would be able to share our email addresses. Often they do that in conferences, but we'll have to deal with that later. If Emmanuel is with us, and yes, this also would go to Franz, because I know I've heard other presentations. In fact, we published a wonderful essay on waste management that Franz did a few years ago in one of the early issues of the MRI journal. But one thing that I noticed in terms of, Emmanuel, of the materials that you had presented, I didn't see any reference to plastic pollution. And yet that's an issue that particularly here in the Philippines that we're dealing with. You know, in a way, it's like low-hanging fruit, trying to, get people to stop using single-use plastics, plastic containers, et cetera, because of their negative impact. I mean, they really, they all wash out to the sea, since we're islands eventually, and they are horrible in their consequences. They break down in the same way the different pollutants you showed on your list, and they get not only into the fish and the sea creatures, but eventually they are ingested by human beings. If you eat fish, you're going to get some aspect of this after it's passed through the fish themselves. So I wonder, do you have anything in particular, or would you just simply add a line in what you presented regarding plastic pollution, Emmanuel?
Oh, yes.
Maybe Franz might want to comment on it as well.
Yes, correct. I was having a limited time to talk about hazardous issues, and I've concentrated my presentation to fine and extra fine particulate matters. However, we have an increasing problem of waste discharge in hazardous issues, which include plastics, metals, and so on, which are being discharged in the environment, and at any rainfall, other large objects are being taken to by drains, river, to sea, and it's a big threat to the global ecosystems. We have But if where I am in Australia, solid waste are being, the government is putting enough effort to manage them in many areas around the world. You find those plastic waste, metals, anything, just dumped, what we call illegal dumping. And it's a big problem because when they break down, they don't live indefinitely. They have a lifetime when they start breaking down. Even when they can last longer at sea, but left on Earth, they break down so quickly at the point you can no longer see that they were there, and they are a big threat to human lives. And those who are being taken, those which are being taken to sea, they are serious threat to marine life, and some of them are made of toxic material. They are killing. We have seen recently in Australia, millions of fishes dying in the River Mare, caused by the development of algae, which was the consequence of not large fragment of pollutants, but by chemicals coming from the agriculture, and which were ending to reach the River Mare, and those products caused the development of blue algae, which are toxic in marine lives. At sea, we have those plastics, and there is no, until now, there is no mechanism in place to take them out of the water. That problem, I know that is there, but I did not develop that due to time constraint, and also because I was heavily focused on fine and extra fine particulate matters.
Okay, so it's one of a number of problems that you're addressing, and the different pollutants have, a diverse range of really toxic effects, as you're pointing out. Franz, did you have anything that you wanted to say on that?
Yeah, of course. I think, Professor Stückelberger, you said we need regulations here also. I think we need here regulations. Like in Macau, we are late now with the plastic bag levy. Some years late, but we have it now. We have to pay for plastic bags. But I think the European Union is phasing out completely one-way plastic. It will be phased out the next years. And I think we have to move in this direction, that we phase out, to eliminate. Because in the hospitals, we need it. Hospitals without plastic is impossible. But so many uses of plastic is not rational, or we don't pay actually for it. I think the problem is we don't pay for it. We don't pay for the costs, which may occur to the oceans, to fish, to our health, future generations. So actually we don't pay at the moment for what we do. This is a major problem.
Okay, we certainly also invite any of the people who are participating in the meeting right there in Macau to raise questions and participate in this discussion. We also have some that are coming through on the chat room. I see this one that's just handed to me from Fernando. How can nation state-based international structures and forums by nature be open to global balance principles and discussions? And I want to add something to this. We already, in the work of, of Bruno Frey earlier yesterday, his position seemed to be that we really have an opportunity to get beyond the nation-state sovereignty system into these overlapping jurisdictions or functional entities. And so, is it possible that global balance can be achieved within the nation-state system as it currently exists? this would be to Stückelberger, or is it something that might, you know, we really need something else? We need a different system.
If I may react to that, I think, and I have also several chapters on that in the book, but I think we need still nation states. And I think the COVID showed it in times of crisis. At the same time, of course, we have to, what Franz said yesterday was very inspiring. We need also other systems, but I would not delete now nation states as an option. They are still an important as entity as long as they are part of a multilateral system and also multi-stakeholder system. And I think there have been very good efforts in that in the last 20 years. With all the weaknesses of the UN system, my office is just in the midst of the UN, WHO, ILO, and UN headquarters in Geneva. So we need to re-strengthen, maybe also modify, but I'm not at a point where I would say, let's destroy the UN system as President Trump tries, but let's modify, adapt, strengthen, and make it even more inclusive in terms of multi-stakeholder. I remember the ILO concept of fair globalization was an effort to say we have nation states, we have companies, we have NGOs, and we have the multilateral systems and regulations, and they together need to do a fair globalization system. I'm still thinking that is not implemented, but we should try to do it against all efforts to destroy multilateralism. And I must say, China, with all criticism we have for good reasons, but is still more committed to multilateralism than some other states. So I think there is no other way than having states on the plan, but also the private sector and the NGO communities, and that is possible.
You know, one thing that we could add, if you do take Catholic social teaching as a reference, it's good to remind ourselves that Catholic social teaching, particularly in documents like Pope John the 23rd's Pacem in Terris back in the early 60s, made a very strong commitment to the United Nations as the framework in which these things would be worked out. Now, obviously, these statements are not eternal, and they are subject to change as our conditions change. But I do think that there's, you know, I tend to agree with you, Christoph, that this is what we have and we can build on. But we have to make it much more effective.
And if I may add one, I mean, also, as you say, the religious organizations, the Vatican is already active, but also in an interfaith perspective. I helped to create last year Faith Invest, and a coalition of religious organizations in investment issues. I remember that we attend the interfaith forum at each T20. So the faith communities, we have also the Green Faith with UNEP. So the faith communities have to play a role and raise their voice in this whole concept of multilateralism.
Are there any other comments from, okay, I have from Chubaka. I still have a question I would like Quilala to address. Okay, Chubaka, would you please step forward?
Oh, yes, thank you. It's kind of concern I'm having. The governance, he said that the country was doing well, which I agree with, and the governance, I'm not coming back to that. But I'm having a concern. The Philippines are located in a very unstable region. We have the typhoons which comes in, he said, 20 in average per year. We have the earthquakes, the volcanic eruptions, because the country is located in the center of the Pacific Ring of Fire. My question is this: how do you think good governance could address the problems which are being frequently posed to Philippines by all these catastrophes? Because except COVID-19, which can fund a solution, I hope it will be tomorrow, but which will fund anyway a solution. But there will not be a solution to typhoons, to earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. The Philippines will be going through a period of disruption and a period of reconstruction. How good governance, how that problem could be addressed by good governance?
Thank you, Emmanuel. These are very significant and interesting questions. Yes, the Philippine government, or most governments, can actually help out. One, all of the things that are happening in the Philippines are a huge part of it is because of man-made environmental destruction. So the floodings that we have, those white water floods that we have whenever it rains, this is normally a case because we have deforested our forests. We're down to less than 10% of our forest cover in the Philippines. Now, the forest cover is supposed to be sponging up all of these rainwaters that comes in and protects the valley. So the government could do well in investing more and participating more in environmental efforts in making sure that these things do not occur, or at the very least minimizes it. With regards to the volcanic eruptions, if I can use the example of the recent Taal volcano, there were some people who perished because they lived in the same area where the volcano is located. Yes. Ideally, and by law, you're not supposed to live in the same vicinity where these volcanoes are located. In fact, they even created a tourist, people started businesses there. They said it's not going to erupt, so they have horseback riding up to the crater. And governance can play a role here by ensuring that people won't set up homes or businesses there that would endanger their lives just in case these things happen or take place. So it's a matter of more government exerting political will in terms of making sure that people won't endanger themselves. We have a program now in the city of Manila wherein it's being cleaned up now because there's a lot of flooding that happens in the creeks because there are people who live beside those creeks and they're not supposed to be there. So, well, that's a different social issue, but in the first place, they're not supposed to be that. That's why they're being evicted now. So government has a huge role to play. Now, given that we are in the Pacific Ring of Fire, just like Japan, but Japan is faring very well in terms of handling all of this. They have earthquakes every minute, I think. But with regards to the technology of the construction of their buildings, insurance, how it plays a very important role, and how the government is promoting insurance for each and every individual. If I can just give one last example. During the Fukushima earthquake, the earthquake in the tidal wave in Fukushima, the tsunami, there was one 7-Eleven that's standing up and the Japanese are falling in line patiently. I don't know if that happened to the Philippines, maybe it would be ransacked or something, but the lone 7-Eleven, the Japanese are falling in line. Two things, according to the article that I read. One is because of their culture, that's how the Japanese are. But a large part of that is they are all covered. They don't have to panic because they're all insured and they're all covered. So government insurance as well as private insurance. I don't know if I answered your question, Emmanuel, but thank you for your question.
That's all right. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. There are some other questions here. One for Christoph, which I'm sure he'll see because it's addressed to everyone. But we must take time for a short break, and then we will begin the fifth and final session at about 3:45, 3:50. Okay, so thank you all very much, and a very rich discussion, very much so.
Thank you very much.